Hello, everybody. My name is Dan, and welcome back to the Circus Continues Tomorrow, a podcast where I, Daniel, ramble about motorsports. Let's keep things short. If you haven't watched the first episode, we've covered the first half of the seasons of F1 and MotoGP, and at the time of recording, we were just starting the summer break for F1 and roughly halfway through the MotoGP summer break. And well, we're back for MotoGP right at Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, which, it's a good circuit. And given last year, which was cinema, with Bez winning his first race for Aprilia and Zarco managing to get a podium somehow, this seems like a good chance for a good race for this season. And obviously, this is at a very different time of the year compared to the previous one. Right now, it's the middle of summer, so the grass is like really goddamn dry, which kind of to compare with Hungary for F1, like you could tell that it was summer. And you can also tell it's summer in Britain because the commentators were talking about how there was not a single chance of rain for the entire weekend. So, hey, at least Quartararo might not be depressed this time. So, let's go over the big news of the racing weekend. Just prior to what the racing action, let's see what's happened off track. Firstly, Fermin Aldeguer wasn't going to participate in this race as he continues to recover from his crash in Assen, with Iker Lecuona of WSBK's Ducati factory team subbing in for him for the race. It's nothing crazy, and given that Lecuona had already gotten his first WSBK win at Donington just over a month ago, this seems like it could go well for him, given what happened in Hungary. He managed to score some points there. I say, knowing that I wrote the script after the weekend was finished, so that's some foreshadowing for you. Secondly, Raul Fernandez signed a 2-year extension with Trackhouse Aprilia, which isn't anything crazy because it was well known prior to this weekend. But, it's another puzzle piece of the silly season of MotoGP for 2027 fitting into place. I haven't really gone into detail on the driver market for next year because a lot of the information that we do have has already been out even before the Concord agreement for the sport was put to paper. Like Pedro Costa was going to Ducati, Agura and Martin were heading to Yamaha, Bagnaia was heading to Aprilia, Quartararo was heading to Honda, Mir was heading to Gresini, and plenty of Moto2 talent were also rising up into the top level of the sport. Marquez and Bez are staying where they are, so nothing too crazy. This is, given his performances, Raul Fernandez definitely deserves the extension. I hope he can win more races next year, but we'll see. However, speaking of silly season, we do have plenty of people likely to leave the sport to either World SBK or retirement or another motorcycle racing series like Morbidelli, Jack Miller, Brad Binder, Alex Rins, and Maverick Vinales. So I'm a newer let me rephrase that. I'm a newer fan of this sport, so I've not known Mav for his peak years within the sport, like rising up through the junior ranks to his wins at Suzuki and Yamaha. And after a fairly uneventful Aprilia stint, he had signed with Tech 3 KTM last year, and it's not last year. I think it was 2024. And last year, during the German Grand Prix qualifying session, he had a tumble that basically fucked up his shoulder completely. Like, if you look at a replay of it, it doesn't look too bad, but it was pretty bad. He tore some ligaments in there, and he's been pretty much struggling ever since. He's missed out plenty of races in the back half of 2025, and it looks to be the same for 2026. Obviously, given the state he's in, it's very likely that he's going to be out of the sport at the end of the season, even despite an attempt to bounce back with Jorge Lorenzo as his personal trainer. And let's just say that some bridges are going to be burned again. Now, for context, back in 2021, Yamaha and Maverick Vinales had severed ties with each other mid-season due to some drama that I do not have time to discuss here. I highly recommend the Beehive Paddock's Iceberg video where he talks about it more. And prior to this weekend, there were some big rumors that Vinales was going to be dropped by KTM mid-season, which is pretty big news. It's very likely he's going to head to WSBK as well. But in an Instagram story, he said all of the articles that were about him were a load of baloney, and he will, quote, not race in SBK, and will finish the year as his contract says. Which, sounds okay. Um, if maybe that were just rumors, right? Well, Tech 3 then announced that Maverick Vinales was going to be replaced by their test rider, Paul Espargaro, as Vinales was set to recover from another shoulder surgery. And no, he's not been dropped nor benched, according to Tech 3 owner Gunter Steiner and KTM themselves. I'm not going to say he was benched, but given that Mav has been complaining a lot about KTM for pretty much most of this season, and given the manufacturer's history of summer riders in the past, I wouldn't be surprised if he is dropped for this season. But at the very best, he'll probably finish out his contract, and then wherever he goes hopefully to better pastures, right? So let's head into the main race weekend. We'll just cover MotoGP in full. I will go into detail on Moto3 and Moto2 later. But, for both free practices on Friday and Saturday, pretty uneventful. All the riders were at their best behaviors, with Alex Marquez managing to top FP1 and Fabio Di Giannantonio topping FP2. Acosta did crash at FP1, and then Jack Miller did the same in FP2. But, what matters in this particular weekend is where you qualify. In practice, which to remind you is like the top 10 riders that set a time move on straight to Q2, the Aprilias were once again the class of the field, breaking the previous fastest lap record of last year, with Raul Fernandez setting a 156.615, and then Bez, despite having a pretty bad slump for the past 3 races, managed to break that record again with a 156.280, and he topped the session. New record for the books. Obviously, I haven't mentioned Bez up to this point, but given what he's been through, he really needed the summer break, and to see him come back after the slump he's been through, he looks. That was a good little news for everyone. Somehow, Digia was the fastest Ducati in that session, which is a little bit of foreshadowing. Plus, we had some other more crashes from Brad Binder and, unfortunately, Pecco Bagnaia, who has to deal with Q1 for Saturday. Speaking of Q1, the biggest casualty was Bagnaia, as both Franco Morbidelli and Iker Lecuona managed to advance into Q2, despite a good attempt from Quattro, I will say. It's just that, whenever Bagnaia's Ducati just doesn't click with him, he's really far in the back, so not much you can do there. In Q2, despite valiant attempts from the Marquez brothers to try and fight for the front, Aprilia were just the top team at this point. Raul Fernandez broke the lap record again with a 156.180. No, that's wrong. 156.181. But then, Jorge Martin, took pole with another lap record of 156.160, which, is infinitely faster than the previous lap record set last year. So the two Trackhouse bikes of Fernandez and Agura will line up behind him. Bezecchi was in 5th, with the two Marquez brothers behind him in 6th and 7th respectively. And Lecuona managed to start 10th, surprisingly. So looking pretty fast, certainly, but, Okay, so for the 10-lap Saturday sprint, both Aprilias had wonderful starts. By both Aprilias, I mean both factory Aprilias. Martin held the lead, and Bez was up to 4th at that point, which, was like one position up, but, it was a good start. The first lap had some casualties, with Cal Crutchlow crashing out at turn 4, and then Iker Lecuona getting taken out by everyone's MotoGP favorite terrorist, Frankie Morbidelli. And then, it was pretty uneventful. I think Bez was trying to fight for the front. We had Alex Marquez also in the mix. But by lap 4, Raul Fernandez slid out at turn 4, which, was a shame, and given that Agura was still in 2nd at this point. And then after that, Bez was fighting with the Marquez brothers through the halfway point of the race, doing a brilliant overtake on Marc Marquez out of Copse and into the S's of Maggots and Beckett's. And soon enough, Alex then passed his brother Mark, with everyone kind of realizing, oh wow, the factory Ducatis were just shedding their tires like crazy, right? Bagnaia was very far in the back. He was nowhere, out of the points entirely for the sprint. And Mark was basically a mobile chicane for Silverstone. About 3/4 into the race, Bez finally got past Fabio Di Giannantonio for the podium, and then Marquez was being hunted down by Pedro Acosta, and then even Joan Mir was starting to get into the mix as well. So I think around the penultimate lap was when Acosta and Mir finally got past Mark, and then Alex also got past Di Giannantonio for fourth. By the final lap, sprint winner was George Martin. Second was Ayagura, and then Marco Bezzecchi, after a tumultuous period where he DNF'd the last 3 races. Well, I say DNF'd. He got crashed out by Martin in Hungary, slapped a marshal and got disqualified from the Czech Grand Prix, and then crashed out in qualifying in the German Grand Prix. So, yeah, after that massive low, he somehow manages to get himself into a sprint podium. Crazy. And as for Marc Marquez, it was looking possible that he could have not been in the points at the very end. Morbidelli somehow passed him, and at the line, he nearly got swamped by Brad Binder and Diego Moreira, but he somehow hung on to ninth, And, it was a solid sprint at the end of the day. With the general consensus was like, Ducati must have fucked up something in their setup because their tires were just non-existent at the end of the race. So, yeah, concerning for the main event as well. They were on the softs, if I remember, because, it's a shorter race. You can just kind of take the risk of going faster. But, their tires were just gone by, lap 4 at that point, right? All right, so on to the main event, the MotoGP 2026 Qatar Airways British Grand Prix. Right at the start of the race, Raul Fernandez got an incredible start from second, as both Jorge Martin and Ayagura had malfunctioning ride height devices, which caused a pretty notable spark show for a bit as they dropped back into the field with, I think, Bez heading into the front before Marc Marquez managing to get into third somehow, before Martin fortunately managed to recover back into the podium places. Oh, and Joan Mir took out Alex Rins out of the race. Usual Joan Mir behavior. Afterwards, Raul Fernandez basically just led the rest of the race. We are not going to see him until the very end. Acosta, Alex Marquez, and Agura were then squabbling for a bit for the early laps, and then around, I think, lap 6, Enia Bastianini became the next casualty of the race. And then the next lap after, lap 7, Iker Lecuona crashed out again. I think this was his own fault. It wasn't like Morbidelli decided to dive bomb him or anything. And then I think the same lap, on lap 7, Acosta got past Marc Marquez, and already, even despite them using, I think, the mediums or the hard mediums, I think a hard front and medium rear, the Ducati's tires were just already beginning to fail. And also, Kyle Crutchlow crashed again. This was, as to quote the commentators, this was becoming a race of attrition, right? That's race of survival, effectively. And then lap 8, Bagnaia would crash out, which is kind of typical given what we've seen in 2025. But the man was barely in the points at this point. He was P15 when he crashed out. So, it's a shame for him. He could have at least finished the race. But I think when the Ducati isn't clicking with him, he's just not going to be excelling in the race. Around lap 9, Martin got past Bez for a second. Just after the halfway point, right? So the positions were Fernandez, then Bez, then Martin, and then Alex behind him. And then Alex then got past Bez for a little bit, but then I think his Ducati's tires were also kind of fucked. And then around lap 10, Agura would have his first major crash of the entire season by sliding out into the gravel at around turn 9, which I think is Brooklands and then Luffield, right? And it's a shame. He was, after the ride height device, he was just kind of nowhere, honestly. He definitely wasn't you could have expected him to have his late race pace and masterclass, but he just wasn't in it. He was fighting with Acosta and Alex Marquez at that point, and he just slid out and crashed, which, this is his, I think, only second DNF since Texas, which was a mechanical failure, but, that's good, right? He's obviously been such a consistent rider. It's just that it's finally caught up to him, unfortunately. Uh, while the replays, well, that was a weird note. While the replays were focusing on the crash of the Japanese rider, Alex Marquez then got passed by both Bez and Acosta, beating that once again, saying his Ducatis were just beginning to fall off as well. So yeah, I mean after that, kind of nothing happened. It was just like a bit of a battle between both. I think it's just everyone was doing their own thing, really. I don't remember much. By about lap 14, Alex Marquez finally got past Acosta, with him chasing down Marco Bezzecchi for third. A good battle. I mean, Bez, despite being, probably very tired at this point, was somehow still able to defend against Alex throughout the circuit, right? Like, Alex was definitely the best Ducati of the race today, or at least of the race, and the fact that Bez was somehow able to hold him off is kind of impressive. About 3 laps to go, Fabio Di Giannantonio got past Marc Marquez, who I think was in 6, or I think he was in 6. So despite him trying to manage his tires throughout the race, he was just he was just nowhere really. It was Acosta in 5th, Di in 6th, and Marquez in 7th, and then that was really all there was. And despite Bez and Alex kind of fighting with each other for a bit, Raul Fernandez, after disappearing into the distance at lap 1, became the race winner, becoming the 12th different race winner at the British Grand Prix. That's a word. Raul Fernandez won the race and became the 12th different winner at the British Grand Prix. And this is, I think, his first actual race win of the season. He's won, I think, 2 sprints prior to this. And the 2 factor really is George Martin and Marco Bezzecchi were behind him. So yeah, that was really fun. Alex Marquez clung on to 4th with his brother Mark in a distant 7th. And I'd like to give a little shout out to Paul Espargaro, despite all the controversy around Vinales, managing to score some points for Tech 3. And Frankie Morbidelli having a surprisingly decent weekend. He's not as good as Di Giannantonio, but he did well given what he's had. So yeah, it wasn't the most entertaining race of the season. Given that the race winners were determined by lap 1 in the sprint and the race, but it was fine. It had some good battles. It's not it's still fresh in my memory. And I enjoyed it for the duration of the race. I wouldn't say it was the best race of the season, absolutely not. It also wasn't the worst race of the season, Yeah, it was fun. It's definitely I mean, Silverstone is a very fun circuit for MotoGP, but there's a lot of controversy surrounding just the grandstands just being pretty empty, And maybe it's just because it's so hot outside, or also because they're just struggling to get tickets compared to F1. So hopefully they can fill the grandstands of the races they have contracted for the next 2 years. I think they signed an extension for 2027 and 2028, which hopefully means hopefully they get with Liberty, they can at least try to promote MotoGP in a way that will bring people into those seats. There, it wasn't it was no one was watching. There were plenty of people still watching, but I just think that given the circumstances, it could be very likely that we might lose Silverstone. We could head back to Donington. I don't mind heading back to Donington or Brands Hatch. Any of the other circuits around the UK will be lovely, right? So, let's head into the standouts and disappointments. I don't have that much standouts. I'm just going to talk about just 2 standouts for this race. Both of them, let's just start off with the factory Aprilias. I think the bigger standout is Bezzecchi. Obviously, given what has happened over the past 3 races, this was a well-deserved comeback with double podium in the sprint and the race. And, at the very minimum, I would have just liked him to just finish the race, be in the points, don't crash. That was the minimum. And he exceeded that expectation. And for Jorge Martin, he won the sprint and finished second in the main race, meaning that he's now more or less 40 points ahead of everyone else in the championship. And that just goes to show that the Aprilia team really needed the summer break for a break. Yeah, yeah, they really needed a break, right? And yeah, they've managed to bounce back from what they've been struggling since at least Mugello, right? Just either due to their own mistakes or just general injuries, right? So yeah, both Aprilias were winners today. And speaking of winners, despite him not being on the podium, I will say Alex Marquez is also a standout. He was, by all means, the best Ducati of the grid by a mile. Fourth in the sprint and the main race. You know, the Aprilias were just that far ahead, but to be honest, if Bez was struggling a lot more, I could have seen him, like, challenging for the podium in both the sprint and the race. Um, you know, obviously, something about the Ducatis just weren't meshing with the tires for whatever it is. We'll find out eventually. And, you know, it's a good race on his part, given also what he's been through. He's been, you know, obviously the injury he had in Catalunya was pretty bad, obviously, but him being able to bounce back after that is worth a shout. All right, so compared to the standouts, I do have a lot more disappointments for this race. And the first one we need to start with is the factory Ducati team. There was just something off about the bike for this weekend. They just weren't the fastest in the sprint and the main race and even qualifying. Their tires were just not strong enough to last that any of the races. Obviously, Pecco, whenever that bike isn't clicking with him, he just nowhere. And Marc Marquez, despite a valiant seventh place in the race, and I think fifth in the sprint. I have to look at that. Hold on, let me just check. I'm pretty sure he finished in the top 10 at the very minimum, but you know, he just couldn't bring the Ducati any more forward compared to the Aprilias or even like Alex. Alex just handed it to him for this weekend. And yeah, it's a shame. Oh no, I just remembered sprint. He finished ninth. So yeah, compared to Czech and Germany, like this was a pretty big step down for Marquez. But you know, hopefully Aragon will be a bit better for him because that's a track he's been very strong at. You know, counterclockwise and all that. So hopefully for Ducati it will be better from here. Another disappointment, I would say, is Iker Lecuona. Obviously, he's had a very strong WSBK season, despite Nicola Bolliga just dominating the whole thing. He got his first race win in Donington, as I said, and in Hungary, while subbing out for Alex, if I remember, he got 7th, so it looked possible he was going to at least score points, but just, man, the cards did not go his way for the weekend. He got crashed out in the sprint by Morbidelli, and he crashed out on his own volition in the race. But, you know, he was fast. He was able to mix in with the midfield. And if it weren't for the crashes, I think he would have scored some points. But, you know, given that, like, I think, like, there were, like, 7 racers that were just gone by, like, lap 5. So I do think that when World SBK does come back, I think he'll be pretty rejuvenated. He was pretty fast around Silverstone this time, but I think he'd rather wait until World SBK comes back, which is only in September, if I remember, so it's going to be a bit of a wait. Now, I will say, I think the team that borders the line between standout and disappointment, or winner and loser, is Trackhouse Aprilia. Obviously, Raul crashed out of the sprints, but then won the race, and Agura got a second place in the sprint and then crashed out of the main race. But I think between the two, I would say the bigger disappointment, which comparatively is Ayagura. He's lost significant ground to Martin in the championship, and with Bezecchi possibly coming back to his winning form, and Raul also catching up to him, the crash was very much unneeded. But, you know, that's just what happened. I think we'll see if Aragon goes his way, but, you know, that's like... But I think this was his first mistake of the whole season, and he definitely is a loser for the race weekend. Let's just hope that when the next round comes along, he's able to bounce back. I'd rather not him get back into like a slump or anything. Now, lastly, let's talk about Moto3, and specifically the Aeon Credit MT Helmets MSI team. Now, obviously, if you've gone through the first episode, I've been keeping tabs on Moto3 because of Hakim Danish and Veda Pratama, mostly because of Southeast Asian representation. And to be honest, Moto3 did have a curveball in qualifying because Maximo Quiles, while trying to set a fast lap, broke his collarbone in Q2, and he was forced to drop out of the race because of it. And then, somehow, the two CIP riders, the Scott Ogden and Adrian Cruzes, the neon green bikes that usually crash out of the race, somehow got into pole position and P2, which I don't know if that was just British bias or the power of the home Grand Prix, but somehow they got it for qualifying. But unfortunately, in the race, despite having a good fast bike, it wasn't going to last. Obviously, by about I think lap 6. No, actually no. By the first lap, both David Almanza and the two Ayo, that's how you pronounce it, not Ajo. Ayo were riders of Alvaro Cape and Brian Uriarte, started fighting for the win, and I think about, I think it was either lap 5 or lap 6. Adrian Cruzes just at I think club or no the second to final corner of Silverstone. I forgot what its name is. Just the final chicane, just suddenly high-sided and took out Hakim Danish, unfortunately. So that was not his fault. It was just Cruzes just taking too much of a risk and just paying for it. And then I think a few laps later, Scott Ogden also crashed out. He high-sided the very final corner like Maximo Quiles did. So that's a shame. The highs of Saturday just couldn't last, right? And after that, it was the usual show. Raul Fernandez's brother, I think Adrian it's Adrian Fernandez. Adrian Fernandez was fighting for the podium positions with I think even Perrone as well, Valentin Perrone. And Almanza managed to get his second win of the season since Thailand. He's been fighting near the front, but usually Quiles tends to win compared to Almanza, and also he's been suffering from illnesses as well. So him being able to get a win for the season is nice, but there's no way he's going to win the championship this year. And I think Carpe finished second and Perrone finished third. Adrian Fernandez was fourth, which is a solid position despite being disqualified for the last 6 races, which not the last 6 races, the first 6 races of the season, which is a shame, but that's what the Leopard team had done, right? So as for the Southeast Asian riders, Veda Pratama was able to at least get P9, but that Honda is just really hampering his potential, really. Like, compared to Hakim Danish, I think he's the most, the rider that is just punching above his weight compared to the bike, And Danish, it's a shame that Cruzes took him out. Well, not really he took it out. It's more like Cruzes crashed, and then while Danish was trying to dodge him, on the way out during the final corner, I think he also high-sided and then just, was out of the race, which is a shame. And also his teammate, Ryose Yamanaka, he qualified well with Danish, and both of them were starting in the top 10. But near the end of the race, Yamanaka just had a mechanical failure, forcing him to DNF, which is a massive shame. He's I wouldn't say he's compared to Piqueras and Danish. He's struggled, certainly. He's not been as strong as Danish, but he's been improving as of late. Which given what's happened, it's a shame that he DNF'd. So double DNF for the MSI riders. Hopefully in Aragon, I think Danish might won there in the Red Bull Rookies Cup, so I hope he can also do well there. And hopefully Yamanaka can keep his good form up. As for the CIP teams, Ogden and Cruzes, I just want them to not crash. Just don't risk it. Just don't crash. You're gonna lose a lot more if you don't crash. If you crash, right? I think this was going to be I think this is just a one-off for the CIP team. They just made a fast bike in qualifying, and in the race, it just didn't have it. All right, so I don't have a major conclusion, but I do want to mention Moto2 because, I haven't really talked about it for this podcast, in its 1 hour, in the 2 hour episode I did. um, a few weeks ago. I will say, Moto2 probably had the best race of the entire weekend. And, Manny Gonzalez is going to win the championship, and plenty of the rising talent of the grid are going to head into MotoGP. And basically, it's kind of just like, um, it's not going to be if you tune in, I think you'd be entertained, but I wouldn't say every race has been, like, important enough for me to watch, except for, like, Assen at the very minimum. But, yeah, Moto2 had the best race of the weekend, so let's just give a general summary of this. Izan Guevara, I think that's how you pronounce it, started on pole with Alonso Lopez and Ivan Ortola behind him. First lap, the order more or less stayed the same. Devin Alonso was really in nowhere land. He was like, I think P15. I think he just didn't have any pace the whole weekend. His teammate was Daniel Holgado was in fourth, so he was probably going to fight for the win. Gonzalez had dropped down to I think seventh from starting from fifth, which typical. But then I think lap one, Alonso kind of took out Colin Weiger, some no name. This I think he was fighting for him like a top 10, and then they just took each other. They took each other out effectively. Somehow, Holgado eventually got into P2 with Gonzalez fighting his way through the field. Eventually Holgado got into the lead, and then Gonzalez got stuck behind a lot of bikes. You got Izan Guevara, Ortola, Tony Arbolino, and Alexis Krieg and Philip Salak also getting into the lead group as well. The lead group, so that I cannot pronounce anything today. And after that, Holgado and Ortola were trying to fight for the lead before then Tony Arbolino also got into the mix before he ultimately crashed out, unfortunately, making Fabio Quartararo very sad. And then Gonzalez also got into the mix, so soon enough it was going to be Holgado versus Gonzalez for the win. And this was like within the last 2 laps, right? But then at the final lap, Manny, just as they pass the line, as Gonzalez passes the line in front of Holgado, Gonzalez just looks up at like the pit board, and basically everyone's realized, or at least like the general consensus says, that he probably confused the lap count and thought he just won the race. So Holgado clips the back of his bike, and then Philip Salak, Ivan Ortola, and Alex Krieg get past them for the podium places. And then Gonzalez just drops down, like, all down several positions. Somehow, in that last lap shootout, Philip Salak manages to get his first race win, becoming the first Czech winner since 2010. And Gonzalez faltered all the way back to P14. Holgado, despite being damaged, did manage to hold on to P4. And, that was, compared to MotoGP and Moto3, that was the best race of the weekend. Obviously, what's happened with Gonzalez is going to be compared to a similar incident in MotoGP where I think it was at the 2023 Catalunya Grand Prix where Alex Espargaro, the brother of Pol Espargaro, thought he won the race but miscounted his laps and then costed himself the win. Plenty of things to talk about there. But, it's a pretty entertaining race overall. I enjoyed it. The whole weekend was fine. I'll just say that. It was fine. So, pretty decent British Grand Prix overall. And I think that's all I really have to say. I will see you all at the next Formula One race at the Netherlands in 2 weeks, and I will cover the Aragon GP as well the next week after that. So, that's all I really have to talk about. Good race overall, and we'll have a week break before the next 2 races of this podcast. So, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you wish to catch the next episode of this podcast. Like or dislike the video. It helps with the algorithm. And comment if you wish to tell me anything I need to improve about this video. And that's all I really have to say. Sorry if I sound a bit off. I'm kind of sick at the moment, but nothing. A bit of medicine can help. So yes. See you all at the next race of the Traveling Motor Circus. Bye-bye.